BetterHelp presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Somich and Mr. Stress-Free Ratanjit S. Sondhe. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Stress-Free Living. I'm Ray Somich, and welcome to our program today. I'd like to introduce all of you to my co-host for so many years, Ratanjit Sondhe. Ratanjit, how are you this fine day?
Wonderful, Ray.
Good. Now that we can hear each other, we're in harmony. That's what we're going to talk about today, being in harmony. And harmony is such a beautiful word, Ratanjit. I can't wait to get into this show because harmony means that two people are meant, or more than two, are meant to sing together. We think of harmony for music. And when you're performing harmony, it's very important that both voices are in sync, that are doing what they should do. And if you have 3, 4, 5-part harmony, then everybody has their role and it blends so perfectly. There's nothing more beautiful than harmony. And yet, when one of those voices is off key or not singing the right note, it could be terrible. It could really sound, oh no, that just wasn't, it went from being perfect to being awful.
Yes.
And that's how we kind of live our life, isn't it? We have a lot of moments where everything is in harmony. And then we have the times when something isn't right. Maybe it's me and I'm just not acting right, talking correctly, seeing things right, and I'm not in harmony anymore. And it just kind of makes it miserable for everybody involved, for me and for everybody else. So you came up with a really great topic. How do we have harmony every day in our life? How do we do what we should do and fulfill our role that we're intended to fill on a daily basis and live a life of harmony?
Well, presence of conflict removes the harmony, as you know, and absence of conflict gives us the harmony. Fundamentally, that's how it works. Whether it is in our society, whether it is at a workplace, or whether it is in family, or whether it is in nature, or whether it is on our own human body. So anytime when everything is not working together, and if they have their own personal agenda, which is in conflict with others' agenda, harmony is gone. So fundamentally, if we can understand to remove conflict from our life, consequently, what we have is harmony.
But, those two words are so opposites. I mean, harmony, your immediate vision is peace and solitude. Conflict, it's immediately you think of battle, you think of war. So, I mean, those are two opposite ends of the spectrum. Is it possible to be harmonious, to be a harmonious enjoyer of life without even getting to a point of conflict? I mean, should we expect that conflict is going to happen all the time, that we have to resolve, or is it possible that we could live a life even without conflict?
Well, see, if we realize why do we have conflict? And if we can understand that, then we can remove conflict from our life and we can live harmoniously. So what causes conflict?
You didn't answer my question, Ratanjit. I'm going to hold you to this. Are there some people, is it possible for me to live my life in such a way that I don't even have to have conflict? Is that possible? You think of some very holy people, very devout, peaceful people that it seems that they have the personality of acceptance, of gratefulness, where they don't even have a conflict in their life. I mean, is it possible to live a life at that level of solitude and peace?
Well, we are going to have conflict. And if we understand that ultimately we need to resolve those conflicts. And the fundamental way to resolve those conflicts is to understand where they come from. First, we have to listen and respect others' opinion, bring them on the table, then only we can resolve the conflict. Yes, there are situations when we are not able to resolve the conflict. Then it's like in our human body, if we have a conflict with cancer, which is in our body, how do you resolve that? We can resolve that cancer through medicine, if that doesn't work, then ultimately we have to remove by operation, we have to remove that from our life. The same thing is when there was a conflict in World War II with Hitler, we could not have him understand, then we have to resolve that through battle, and that is the worst thing we can do. There is a tremendous amount of distraction and all that happen when we are not able to resolve that conflict properly.
So I don't know why, but we're having a conflict this morning because I keep asking the same question and you keep giving me the same answer, and it's not matching. So I'm going to assume, based on the answer that you have, to try to resolve this conflict, that you do believe that everybody has to have conflict in their life, that it isn't possible to go through life with such an attitude or such a grace that anybody can avoid having some level of conflict. Is that true?
Well, life is about constantly handling our conflicts, right?
Okay. So we're all going to have it. It's like the attitude that says, it's up to us how we handle the conflict, right? Okay. So attitude seems to be, since I mentioned that word, seems to be one of the big reasons we have conflict. I mean, if we have a negative attitude, if we don't even consider other people's respectfully and their ideas, then our own attitude is going to cause a lot of conflict.
Yes.
How do we adjust that? How do we open our mind to be more open to other ideas and not think that we are always right all the time?
See, ultimately, Ray, all our conflicts come from having conflict within me. And when I have conflict with you, it is a reflection of the conflict I'm having within me. So all our conflicts start with us, although we blame everyone else for our conflict or the conflicts. So each one of us is a source of conflict. Each one of us is a source of harmony. So if we understood that, if we can convey this message today to our listeners, we will be successful in bringing harmony in their life.
So you say it's kind of within me, but let's give a scenario that's going to play out thousands of times across the world, maybe millions of times over the holidays, the upcoming holidays, where people get together, sometimes even with siblings or parents, certainly with uncles and aunts and those kinds of people. And they say, oh, I have to go to this event and Uncle George is going to be there, or my big brother Tom is going to be there, or whatever it is. And I'm so worried about that, because every time we get together, we fight. Every time we get together, he doesn't say nice things, or he's so political, or he's so religious, or whatever the angle is. I know we're going to fight. I know it's going to be bad. It's going to hurt the entire event. You just see these and hear these things happen all the time. And the person seemingly going into it has a good attitude. It's like, I don't want that to happen. I hope it doesn't happen. I pray that that doesn't happen, but then it does happen. And then you have that disharmony, you have that conflict. All right. So are you saying that, with both people, it is within them?
Yes.
Okay. So even though I think that I'm going to this party with an open mind and a good attitude, I already have that conflict within me too.
Yes. See, if you are peace with yourself, it reflects peace. And then you have automatically patience to understand others. And once you have that patience to understand others, you create an environment of comfort with whoever is present around you. They can express their opinion, which may be totally different than yours, but they know that you are not going to blow up. You are not going to suddenly contradict and say. So you can have reasonable discussions. But if the other party is so much mounted in their belief and thought process that they are absolutely not going to entertain listening to you, it becomes impossible to have a civil conversation.
So does that mean then that as long as one person is at peace with themselves, then that person should never be involved in a conflict then? Because if other people are saying things or doing things wrong, it won't bother me, and so I'll be able to stay harmonious?
So there are two reasons to get involved in conflict, Ray. One is to protect your ego. And the second is to carry your mission. Your mission in life is to add value. So if I am having conflict with you, if you said something which is incorrect, and I try to correct it, and I see your temperature going up, and you're taking a stand, so then I have to ask myself, by convincing him, am I going to add the higher value? What is my mission? So if you are part in the ego mode, then your mission is to prove that you are right. And when the two people are part in proving themselves right, conflict flares up. But if one person is part in a mindset, I am here only to add the highest value. By keeping quiet, would I add the highest value? Because I can't change this opinion, and this opinion is not going to change anything. So I rather be quiet, and all you say is, I respect your opinion.
You probably have touched on the number one point that causes conflict. And I'm talking not in the business world, because the business world adds a whole other element to it, but in a private gathering between people, which again is something going to happen for a lot of folks over the next few weeks. If you have a different opinion, and I feel very strongly about mine, and you feel very strongly about yours, it really is difficult for me to simply say, you're right, or I even to say I respect your opinion is a challenge when you don't respect their opinion. I mean, when you are convinced that your opinion is correct and that you're crazy, it's really hard to show that respect in that environment. What do you do? I've never seen you in 30 years that I have seen you in business and in all kinds of relationships. I've never seen you argue with anyone that your opinion is right and their opinion is wrong. And I've been with you when I know that is the case, but I've never seen you argue. What do you personally do? How do you personally control yourself so that you don't have to give your opinion as being the right one?
Well, see, Ray, we have talked in this show, The Real Me. When I see a person, I see a human body, a housing for the divine power which is bringing life in them. And I bow to that power in them. My respect is to the power present in them. My respect is always unconditional to that power in them. And I realize that they also have the human body mode. They have the brain, they have eyes, they have ear, they gather information from these five senses. And I also realize these five senses give you information which at best is incomplete, because eyes can only see certain light, certain frequency of light. Ears can only hear certain wavelength of sound, and we can only touch and feel. So at best, the information gathered by a human body is incomplete, but it doesn't stop there. It gets contaminated by our fear or insecurity or greed, which is actually a reflection of our ego or separateness. So having this realization, I know that information gathered by any human being is at best incomplete. So even my information, which I have collected, is incomplete, although I believe that I'm right. So who is right? We are all struggling to find the truth. The only truth which is available to us is that we are enlivened by the divine force present in us. So when I see somebody, I have unconditional respect for the power present in them. That's who they are. And I'm not worried about the information their mind has gathered. And that many times, or most of the time, is incomplete, if not erroneous.
There's a beautiful answer. I think in this day that we live in, this age that we live in, we have so much access to so much information. So if I were to gear up for a party because I know that I'm going to be talking to somebody who has a certain stance on some kind of an issue, I can probably spend days, literally hundreds of hours, finding support data for my stance on the issue. So I'm all geared up and I'm ready to take on Uncle John because I have all of these stats and all this information of why I'm right. Okay. And I think this access to information, which, as you just pointed out, could be terribly erroneous.
Yes.
I mean, pretty much anything that you want to believe in, you can find some kind of a supporting documentation on the internet for.
Yes.
The craziest, wildest ideas, you can find some kind of report or study that verifies that.
I want to share a story with you which will verify that after the break.
After the break. Perfect. And we'll talk, because I think that is one of the big ways and that maybe we can help people to overcome these conflicts and be more harmonious. We will be right back. This is Stress-Free Living, hopefully taking and adding some harmony and removing some conflicts from your life. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, Ratanjit, you hold on to that story. If anybody would like to comment for 90 seconds, please do.
Steve Marsh speaking. I
Yes.
can't help myself. So first, I only wish that we could hold ourselves, that the world was made of Dr. Sondhe. But having said that, in one way, to avoid conflict, it seems like you always have to, in a sense, acquiesce to the other person, because whether it's, as you said, a family gathering, be with your wife, and she wants to go here and you don't want to go here, or you think you should handle the kids one way and she wants to handle it another way. What you're saying is, well, my sense, you can use all your senses, but gee, that isn't how I feel. And it sounds like you have to acquiesce whether you agree or not, because you're trying to avoid conflict and they're seeing it from their world and you're seeing it from your world. So my issue is, how do I make peace with that? Anyway, that's where my head is on that.
Excellent question. I will ask that one. Do we always have to acquiesce to the other, or is there a way to resolve it without that? Are we the one that always has to give in? Good question. I think, well, I don't want to give my opinion. We'll wait for Ratanjit. He'll have the better answer. Who else has a thought? Anybody? We have a new guest that we have admitted, and this iPhone, they're trying to connect, and I'm not sure who that is. Always a little bit concerned about people crashing our party that don't really want to be here. Just think they do. Anybody else have a thought? We have a couple seconds left. Welcome, Darby.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I just thought about when we were talking about Hitler and how we have to.
I got to catch you. I'm sorry. We are back on Stress Free Living. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And no matter how you are joining us, it could be by radio in Cleveland, 101.5 or 1330 AM. It could be on our YouTube channel, where we post all of our programs on a 24/7 basis. Just go out to YouTube, the Stress Free Living Radio channel, put that into the search, and you'll come up with us. And if you subscribe to that, every time we post a new show, you will automatically get an email that tells you that we have posted another email that you can listen to and share with others at your convenience. And of course, you can also listen to us globally anytime we have our live program at wintradio.com. Ratanjit, you were just about to go in. By the way, we had some great conversations on the Zoom. I didn't mention the Zoom opportunity as well, that people can join us so we can talk with you in between our breaks and see your smiling faces, or maybe not smiling all the time, but your beautiful faces nonetheless. And if you would like to do that, we have the link available to you out on our Facebook page, as well as on wintradio.com. So you can join us on a Zoom basis live every week as well. Ratanjit, you were just about to go into a story and to kind of point out the point that I had brought up. I really am gearing up because I have to prove that I'm right and this other person is going to be wrong. So I get all kinds of data and I spend all these hours researching this. And now I'm ready to take you on because I really know my stuff. You said you kind of have a story that accentuates something along those lines where maybe some of that data isn't correct after all.
So this story is about how our information is always incomplete. I had a close friend. We went to college together. I took on chemistry and he took on physics. And he eventually did his PhD in physics and specialized in light, how light travels and all that. So he was visiting me and he likes to have beer. Of course, I don't drink. So I brought him some beer, and after a couple of beers, he said, you know, Ratanjit, all this PhD and all this is useless. I said, what are you talking about? He says, remember when we were in high school, in the physics class, they had a pinhole camera proving that light always travels in a straight line. So when we went to college, when we were working, and then they had a penny in front of the light, and they showed that the light portion of that comes in the backside of the penny. So the light is a wavelength, not a straight line. So now when I was doing my PhD, basically there are all kinds of hypotheses. And some of those hypotheses explain 80%, 85% of all the phenomena known to us of light. So none of them explains 100%. So what I learned after doing PhD, that I don't know anything. So that is, science tells you, we believe in science, right? But even science is incomplete. So ultimately, if you have a brain surgeon, if you ask a brain surgeon how brain works, and he says, well, we are still working at it. But if you ask a high school student who has done some class in brains, a high school student will tell you, I know how the brain works. The less you know, it appears that more you know. The more you know, we know that we know very little.
So those are great examples. And I think down deep, we all know that. I think we know that there are always at least two sides to every story, and that all the data is not exactly lined up with my opinion, and that there's at least room for doubt, if not a lot of room for, for difference opinions. How do we handle that again emotionally? Is it, you had mentioned what you do, which was beautiful, seeing the divine within everybody and overlooking our human differences and our human frailties because of you bow to the divine. I mean, that's a beautiful story. And I don't mean to make light of it. It is an incredibly awesome way to live. But in that moment, in that practical moment of potential conflict, is that what we just have to do? We have to take, look at this as an opportunity to be humble and step back and avoid that conflict. Is that just what you're saying there? Because that, at that point where that person triggers you, they say that thing that you just can't quite cope with. You can't not respond to that because it's so outrageous with your beliefs. What do you do in that moment?
Well, before I answer that, let me digress for a second.
Okay.
See, our human system is designed to make a split-second decision. Because when something comes, body has to decide whether it is dangerous or is it good for me? And you are always making a decision. So whether the information is very little, you are still going to make a decision. Or if the information is more, you are going to change your decision, but you're still going to make a decision. So that is why we are all opinionated. We are all going to conclude this is right or this is wrong based on how much information I have. So that is the nature of a human being, because nature has designed this human body to protect itself. So how does it protect? It has to decide whether it is going to be harmful to me or is it going to be beneficial to me. So these are the two decisions we always make. So whether we meet somebody, we decide instantly. People say your first impression is the last impression and all those kind of things. But we are constantly deciding. So understanding that you are dealing with every human being, a person who is opinionated, who is going to decide based on their information. So, but once you understand all that, the purpose of life has to be brought in front of you. Purpose of life is that my purpose of being here is to experience joy, happiness, contentment. And that comes to me by adding value. When I make a difference, my inside becomes happier. My inside becomes joy-filled. So that is my purpose. So all the information which is available to me, I must understand that I have to always remain as a student, constantly keep my mind open for new additional information, and do not take a stand under any circumstances. And then we have to pick our fights, Ray. There are situations when certain things are going to harm you, harm the society, because somebody has erroneous information, erroneous agenda. So then you have to stop that. So that is important. And that's why we have a civil society. We have given authority to the police department or law enforcement who can handle those conflicts for us if they are not being handled by us.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there are some circumstances, like you just said, where there's really serious consequences of a potential conflict. So that is a kind of another topic, if you will. It's
Yes.
I'm glad you brought it up, but we don't really want to go into that today. We do want to talk about the majority of potential conflicts that don't have that kind of serious consequence. They're more based on our ego and our greed and our, us being right, those kind of factors. So maybe we'll talk about that another day, but for today, in light of the fact that many people do have regular conflicts that they either try to resolve and fail or don't even bother trying, those are the ones we're talking about. So I think it's a good time with that, though, to go to one of the questions that one of our Zoom guests had. And that is, with the idea of adding the highest value and kind of taking the proper way out, doing the right thing, to use that expression, is it just smarter for us always to acquiesce to the other person? If we're in a position where we disagree, where we want to think one way and they think another, we want to do one thing and they want to do something else, is it adding the highest value simply to say, okay, I'll do it your way, you're right, or is it always the right thing simply to say, let's agree to disagree and move on? Are we compelled to always be that person to acquiesce and just say it's okay?
Well, see, as I said, we have to pick our fights. Where do we want to oppose somebody? Where do we want to say no? All that depends. If you have basic principles which are going to be violated, then you say no. But you say no politely, not enforcing your values on others. And otherwise, what happens is, in your family, you have your spouse, you have your children, you have your brothers, sisters, your parents, your cousins, your uncles. And they all have different opinions, different information they have gathered. And they all would ask you to do certain thing. And obviously, you are going to do what does not violate your basic principles, your basic, it doesn't harm you. It doesn't. So obviously, there are some right things or wrong things. If your spouse wants to go shopping, or if they want to go somewhere and they want to have you come with me because I need you. So then you, although you don't like shopping, that is to serve a partnership. You have to bend, you have to do certain things which you may not like. But as long as they are not harming you, they are not violating your principles, then that is fine.
So, I mean, and if I think the person who asked the question understands. I mean, if your buddies are saying, let's go, let's go rob the convenience store, and let's have fun and do something like that. I mean, certainly that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about doing something that is, immoral or against my values and things like that. But if there are things that really don't matter from that perspective, like you just said, your spouse says, hey, would you help me? I need to go shopping and get a few last gifts here for the holidays. Would you help me pick them out? And that's the last thing that I want to do, because I know I have a lot of other things that I want to do that I would prefer to do. But are you saying in those cases, it is the right thing to say, okay, my spouse needs my help, or my friend, or whoever it is, and so I'm going to do that, even though that's not what I want. It's not maybe the best use of my time as I evaluate what I need to do over the next couple of weeks, but it's the right thing to do. It's the kind thing to do. It's the humanitarian thing to do. Is that how I should look at it? And I just say, okay, I'm going to be the one that always gives in and does what other people want.
Yes.
Oh boy, you did not hesitate to say yes. All right, we probably lost half of our listeners on that one. I mean, how do we do that, Ratanjit? How do we make that kind of sacrifice?
If you are supposing I have a commitment to do a radio program a certain time, and my wife comes and say, on that time, I need you to do this. So I have to share with her because I have this commitment. I'm not able to do this. I would love to do that, but can we do that later on? So that is how you handle those things. But if I'm sitting there reading a book or something, then obviously I rather complete that book. It's very interesting. Or I'm writing a book, I rather sit and write that book. But at that point, if she asks me to do something, I'll be only glad to do that.
All right. Well, I'm not, maybe that is the answer that I was looking for. And again,
you do that all the time.
I did. And I guess, deep down, I think all of us do. I think, deep within us, if we really stop and, shut out the noise, we know we're supposed to be serving to each other. We know we're supposed to be helpful. We know that we're not supposed to think about our own personal opinions first, or our personal likes first. We're supposed to help other people, especially if they're asking for help. If they need help from us, I think we know that we're here to help. But in the moments when that happens, like you just gave a great example, I'm in the middle of a project and I'm thinking I'm pretty far along and I only have another couple hours to get this done, and I'm called away to help. It really is difficult to forget about what's important to me and do what's important to somebody else. And we know that's the right thing to do. We understand that that's the purpose of life, but I don't even think that's considered ego at that point. It's not that we're doing it because it makes us feel better or more powerful or more important. It's just that that's a focus for us at the moment. And it's hard for us to walk away from that and do something else. I mean, you you do understand that, right? I mean, I know, you were so emphatic about saying, yes, we have to do that, but you do see the other side of it.
The main reason of our conflicts are the direction. So if my direction of all my thought is what is in it for me, they're all directed for me, then I am going to be a conflict creator in my life. But if I am part in the mindset of I'm here to serve, I'm here to add value, how can I make a difference in others' life? So direction changes from me to others. You are less likely to have conflicts in your life.
When we come back from this break, I want to talk about perspective. Is there ever a time when we should try to change other people's perspectives and have them see it our way? Is there a way of doing that? That is not going to increase the conflict and turn it into a full battle and can be used as conflict resolution? That's something I've always wanted to ask, and we're going to do that when we come back in just a moment on Stress Free Living. All right, great people. We've got 90 seconds. If anybody would like to share a thought or ask a question.
We have Brahmji from Florida. Hello, how are you, sir? Unmute yourself.
The microphone icon, you want to click on that microphone. There you go.
How are you?
Great.
Fine. भाई साहब ना सत श्री अकाल।
सत श्री अकाल. Oh my God.
हाँ हम आपका प्रवचन सुन रहे थे।
The goddess herself is here.
आप है goddess, हमको रास्ता दिखा रहे हैं।
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Nice having you.
So we rescheduled they were going to visit us, Ray, but because Dolly's leg is so bad or knee is so bad, so she's hardly able to walk or anything. So we have to cancel that.
You should Zoom it with her later. So at least you can see each other.
So
no, but it could be the other way around, that we could help.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that has a quick thought? We're about to come back on. Just don't want to leave anybody's ideas out. Steve, I hope I hope that was a good answer to your question, Steve. The answer is yes.
Just in the last segment, when you all spoke about Hitler and the conflict that he brings, it seems like the answer to resolving that conflict was to answer back with conflict.
Yeah, sometimes you have to confront that. It's just like when you have cancer, is going to
come back. We are back on Stress Free Living. Ratanjit, Sondhe, and yours truly, Ray Somich, with you, and our cast of Zoom guests that are with us that we really love talking with, although they're very brief talks in between our segments here of the program each week. But we do have a question that we're going to come back to in just a moment from one of them. But Ratanjit, I had asked you a question before we left, before we went to the break, regarding the conflict. Usually, a lot of times it comes because of perspective. It isn't even the facts. It's just how you look at something, how you feel about something. And so if you're in a situation where you think you can change somebody's perspective, you think that you can give them some insight, just a different way of looking at it. And if you do it respectfully, is that ever a good solution? Just to say, okay, I understand your point. I respect where you're coming from, but would you please consider this other perspective on this issue and give it some consideration? Do you think that approach can be done sometimes to help eliminate a potential conflict and tone it down because you bring in the idea of perspective?
Well, see, you have to have emotional deposit with the person who will then listen to your perspective. It's like when you are dealing with the bank, if you have never borrowed any money, they are not going to give you any money. So you have to have a record of paying back the loan, then the bank is going to give you the money. So similarly, if you have emotional deposit with your friends, with your family, you are a good listener, you always listen to them, you always do things for them, then they are in a much better position to listen to you. You are able to correct them if not immediately, but slowly.
I love that answer. So if that could almost be a plan then, and I guess as I say this, I hope that you're not thinking that, tell me if you think that this is inappropriate behavior. But if I want to introduce that concept to somebody, maybe I have to do it in baby steps, and I have to build those emotional deposits over time so that I could introduce the concept of seeing it from my perspective, from a different perspective. But if I go into a pretty much a stranger or somebody who I've had conflicts with continuously, to suddenly say something like that probably is not going to have a good result.
Yes. And then there is a way to change somebody's opinion. You have to lay the foundations of things. Supposing somebody is your friend, your spouse, your in your family has bad eating habits. And then how do you correct that? You have to understand that most of these eating habits come from taste. You have to serve the good food, which is better tasting. So ultimately, you are able to change that. Similarly, an idea or a thought, you have to lay foundations of information, which may not be directly conflicting what you want to change, but lay a foundation with different information and different understanding so that ultimately you are able to change that.
You know, a little sidebar, you taught me a long time ago the difference between adding value and adding the highest value.
Yes.
And I think this show is really pronouncing that again, proclaiming that, because it's pretty easy to add value. We can do that really very impulsively without thinking too much. I can do this and this, and it'll make things better. But it's a lot more thought required and a lot more using my internal experiences and knowledge and asking for wisdom to really know that how to add the highest value. And I think to try to avoid conflicts, I think we really have to step it up to that highest value. It has to be a plan. It has to be thought through. It has to be, very much understanding and a lot of empathy that we employ to be able to resolve conflicts and different situations with friends and family. It's not easy to do this, but we are capable of doing it if we really, take the time and the effort to really try to add the highest value to the situation. If anybody goes in this and says, I'm just going to be kinder, I'm just going to be more, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to, when somebody says something nasty, or I disagree with, I'm just going to walk away. I mean, those are quick ways of maybe adding value, but that isn't really resolving the situation at all.
Yes. See, anytime when a person loses his temper or all these things, there's something behind this. If you have higher blood pressure, So you are more likely to lose temper quicker. So if your fellow worker or your spouse or somebody has temper problem, you have to understand where it is coming from, rather than treat that on the surface. We have to stop putting band-aids. We have to start curing situations. Highest value only happens when we understand the root cause of any conflict, root cause of why things are going wrong. That requires tremendous amount of work. That requires not judging people. That requires having faith in them. That requires that there is a goodness hidden in every single human being. And when we nurture that goodness, that is when that goodness comes out.
Couple last questions here that we have time for from our listeners. One is, when you mentioned Hitler earlier, Hitler was all about creating conflict, there's no question. But the way that the world resolved his conflict was to create even a larger conflict, led to the World War. Is that sometimes necessary? Is sometimes conflict required to resolve conflict? And I mean, I know it's never what we want, but sometimes is that what we have to do?
Well, that was the best option at that point. Maybe there is another option. There is a different way of removing the war. Now, as bad as the nuclear power is, but because of the nuclear power, the loss at the war is so great that everybody is backing off on having a real war.
Right.
So although it is a negative thing, but it has resulted into creating a positive environment. Obviously, as long as it is not in the hand of somebody crazy who is willing to destroy himself and the world. So the world has to monitor all that. So the conflict resolution is, and there's no one solution. Sometimes we don't have enough time to find another solution, so we have to really go through handling conflict with conflict.
Very good. I have another question that was brought up from one of our listeners early on, is that we think that we're in a conflict situation with another person. We don't realize that the toxic nature of that actually goes beyond us. And actually at the party that we're at, when people can sense that two people are fighting, it really changes the entire environment. It really, it kind of destroys that spirit, that mood for the entire room.
Yes.
That element, okay, that additional point that says it's not just between you and Bill, it's really going to change everybody. It's going to change the way I feel about everybody and everybody feels. Isn't that a strong enough point that we should bow and we should just kind of, take the easy way out and escape from causing that kind of rift? I mean, why isn't that a strong enough point, knowing that this is going to change maybe our entire holiday season if we have that fight? Why isn't this more important to us and we still have to engage in this conflict?
Well, see, that is why when you have people you invite for any of these gatherings, you have to, if you are not able to handle somebody who is going to create a conflict, it is better to have them not included in the list. And if that conflict is created at the party, it is somehow or other you have to remove that person from that situation so that you are able to create a situation which is much more harmonious. But these are very difficult questions. There are no simple answer, Ray. But ultimately, if we wait for our artery to get blocked, and then at that point we are looking to help this person, you're going to have heart attack. So we have to start this understanding at a very early age in schools. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to help.
I just looked at the clock. It is time for us to go. Ratanjit, what a great topic. I hope maybe we can continue talking about this in the future. Conflict resolution, being in harmony. Thank you so much for your loving thoughts and ideas. And we thank all of our guests here today, all of our visitors with us, however you are listening to us. We hope that we have added value to your life. Remember, we're all playing the same game. Have a great day, everybody.